My relatives skipped my husband's funeral, while I sat alone in the front row, staring at a casket holding the love of my life. My parents and sister were 300 miles away, clinking champagne glasses at a luxurious resort. My mother literally texted me stating a funeral was too melancholy for them to attend on my sister's birthday. They believed that in order to preserve their celebration, they could simply remove my sorrow. However, as I was crying during the eulogy, my phone began to vibrate uncontrollably on the wooden pew, shattering the quiet chapel. 44 missed calls. Then my mother sent me a desperate message. Give me a call right now. Something's gone terribly wrong. They prioritized a party over my husband's memories, yet they were on the verge of total collapse due to that one desperate phone call. Stay with me to the end to see the ultimate retribution unfold. My name is Violet and I am 33 years old. Grief is said to have the power to reduce your life to its most basic form. However, I never anticipated the coldness of the reality about my own flesh and blood. The smell of lies and the oppressive weight of my reality filled the tiny funeral chapel. I sat absolutely alone in the very front row, my palms quivering as my fingers tightly grabbed the edge of the dark wooden pew. The polished mahogany coffin containing David, my husband, my pillar of support, and the man who had loved me without conditions for more than 10 years, was placed just a few feet in front of me. He had been taken from me in the blink of an eye, a sudden medical emergency taking him away before we could even say goodbye. You would imagine that your family would act as a barrier to protect you from the storm in such a situation. But as I looked at the vacant seats next me, the sad truth struck in. Nobody in my family attended to my husband's funeral. My mother, Eleanor, my father, Richard, and my younger sister, Vanessa, were 300 miles away. They didn't miss it owing to a tragedy or a flight cancellation. They willingly selected Vanessa's fancy 30th birthday celebration instead. To them, my lifelong mourning was merely a nuisance to their weekend of clinking champagne glasses at a 5-star resort. Just before the service began, my mother texted me to inform me that everyone would find attending the chapel to be too melancholy, and that David would have rather them to celebrate Vanessa's special day. They thought they could just erase my sadness to safeguard their celebration, entirely naive to the reality that their casual cruelty was about to ignite an avalanche that would wreck them forever. You must comprehend the toxic dynamic that had been developing for years in order to fully comprehend how my own family could desert me in my hour of greatest need. Vanessa has always been the most adorable youngster. I was supposed to be the calm, trustworthy person who never asked for anything, yet in my parents' eyes the sun rose and set according to her whims. Vanessa's affluent lifestyle, her expensive attire, and even the boutique consulting firm she owned were all part of an elaborate house of cards. However, my family never publicly revealed the source of that illusion's support. It wasn't my parents' small retirement savings, and it surely wasn't Vanessa's failing business enterprises. David and I were there. David was a self-made, talented businessman who was also incredibly humble. He preferred to live well without flaunting his fortune, therefore he kept his actual net worth hidden from the public. But since he loved me, he silently stepped up whenever my parents came crying about an emergency. Over the years, we paid off their unmanageable credit cards, covered Vanessa's business losses, and paid their medical expenditures. They joyfully received our money, but they treated David like an outsider, a simple ATM to feed their avarice. Wearing their fake pride like armor, they stealthily bled my quiet husband dry while treating him with passive-aggressive disdain. They expected the gravy train would run forever, utterly taking his kindness for granted. They were unaware that they were cutting off the only thing holding them afloat as they left his memory behind for a weekend of unmerited luxury. The only sounds in the chapel were the muffled sobs of David's closest friends and the gentle, repetitive ticking of the wall clock. I was trying my hardest not to break the delicate glass dome of communal mourning that constituted the mood. Just as Marcus, David's lifelong best friend and business partner, went up to the podium to deliver the eulogy, a strong jolt disrupted my focus. There was more than one buzz. Sitting face down on the wooden pew next to my black purse, my phone started dancing wildly. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Expecting a stray notification, I swiftly grabbed it, heart pounding, and turned it over to quiet it. Instead, My eyes expanded in absolute surprise. The screen was entirely swamped with notifications. 44 missed calls, all of them from my mother. Before I could even grasp the absolute ridiculousness of 44 missed calls during a funeral ceremony they judged too gloomy to attend, a text message flashed up the display. Eleanor wrote a hurried all-caps paragraph. "Give me a call right now. Something's gone terribly wrong. We are stranded." Trembling, I carefully slid out of the pew and strolled into the empty marble-floored foyer of the chapel. An icy wave of rage quickly took control of my grief. When I phoned her back, my mother didn't ask how I was holding up. She didn't inquire about David. Instead, her voice blasted through the line, shrill and frantic, dueling with the distant sound of ocean waves and a ranting hotel clerk. Their wonderful weekend had suddenly turned into a complete legal nightmare. The five-star resort had abruptly denied every single one of Vanessa's credit cards, and immediately outside the dazzling glass lobby, the expensive sports car she had chartered for her grand entry was actively being fastened to the back of a repossession truck. I was suddenly struck with a disturbing conclusion as my mother's desperate voice came over the phone speaker. David hadn't been blind to the way my family treated me, nor had he been ignorant to their voracious greed. For years I had tried to smooth things over, making excuses for their entitlement. However, David was able to see through their deceit. He had always been steps ahead of everyone else in business. As it happened, he applied the same keen insight to our private lives. Months before his abrupt passing, when his health first became unstable, David had quietly sat down with his legal team to assess our finances. He was aware that my family would not come together to defend me if something were to happen to him. They would quickly circle like vultures to pick apart his hard-earned properties. Without uttering a single word to me, wishing to save me the grief of realizing my family's actual character, David had entirely rebuilt his whole corporate empire and personal holdings. He methodically eliminated my parents' names from the corporate account's authorized user lists, which they had been using covertly as personal piggy banks. He formally closed the high-limit credit cards that Vanessa habitually maxed out for her boutique business under the excuse of interim operating loans. Most significantly, he put all of the money from our joint interests into a highly secure private trust, designating me as the only beneficiary and executive. A pre-programmed automated trigger cut all external financial relationships as soon as the banks processed the legal death certificate that morning. My family was dealing with more than a brief issue at their five-star resort. David had constructed a permanent legal wall around our fortune, ensuring they would never be able to exploit his legacy again. Standing in the silent chapel lobby, listening to my mother panic, my anguish solidified into something impenetrable. "Violet, you have to fix this right now." Eleanor's artificial pity vanished as she screamed over the phone. "The resort management is threatening to call the police if we don't settle the account. And Vanessa is having a big panic episode in the foyer because they took the keys to the Mercedes. To settle the accusations and spare us this embarrassment, we need you to send $50,000 to Vanessa's account right away." I let the phone to remain silent until her labored, desperate breathing was the only sound audible. For 22 years, I had watched David give everything to a family that didn't even respect him enough to show up to his funeral. Finally, I found my voice, and it was steadier than it had ever been in my life. "No," I answered gently. "What do you mean, no?" My mother gasped, appalled. "Your sister's entire reputation is on the line. How do you manage to be so self-centered?" "What is selfish?" I answered, my tone piercing through her hysterics like ice. "Is skipping my husband's funeral because a chapel is too somber for your luxury vacation. David is gone, Mom, and with him your unearned lifestyle is gone. Secondly, there isn't a bank error. Due to your widespread financial misbehavior, David's legal team has already placed a complete freeze on every trust fund, credit card, and allowance you have been embezzling. The gravy train has officially wrecked. Do not call me again." I immediately blocked her number after hanging up, allowing them to deal with the public disgrace they had caused themselves. The aftermath of that phone conversation was nothing short of a total breakdown for my family. Without David's modest financial backing to hold up their delusions, their flimsy house of cards fully imploded within weeks. Vanessa's boutique consulting firm, which had been bleeding funds for over a year, filed for bankruptcy almost immediately once her high-limit credit cards were permanently cancelled. My parents had to substantially reduce their size since they were unable to pay off the enormous debts they had accrued while believing our fortune would always save them. They sold their suburban home at a massive loss just to keep the debt collectors from taking everything they had left, moving into a cramped, run-down apartment on the edge of the city. Desperate and outraged at their abrupt loss of position, they tried to launch a violent smear campaign against me. Vanessa posted tearful videos online, claiming that I was a heartless older sister who had cut off her own grieving family during a time of crisis. My mother called distant relatives and portrayed me as a spiteful, avaricious widow who was hoarding David's estate. But they neglected one essential detail. I had receipts. When the public outrage started hammering on my door, I didn't hide. I simply took a deep breath and publicly disclosed the identical text messages my mother had given me on the morning of the funeral. They made it clear that Vanessa's birthday celebration was more important and that David's farewell was too gloomy to attend. The public reversal was quick and unequivocal. The internet absolutely turned on them, shattering Vanessa's social media presence and leaving my parents entirely isolated, forced to face the terrible reality of their own selfishness. 3 months have passed since that faithful day, and the silence in my life is no longer heavy with pain. It is serene. I have utilized David's legacy to start completely over, moving away from the toxicity of my past and constructing a quiet, meaningful life that genuinely honors his memory. His wisdom didn't simply protect my finances. I was able to stand on my own 2 feet thanks to it. I'm now interested in everyone who has listened to my narrative through to the very finish. If your own family treated you with that amount of brutality and disdain, would you have helped them out of their motel crisis? Or would you have let them face the repercussions of their choices? Please share your opinions in the comments section below, along with the city you are viewing from, so I can gauge the global reach of David's tale. Thank you so much for watching, and I am leaving 2 other fantastic tale scripts on the final screen that will undoubtedly surprise you. Goodbye and stay strong.